Hi there, this is Michael Becker, and welcome to this session as we dig into understanding the personal data and identity marketplace. And with me today is Julian Ranger, who is the CEO and founder of DigiMe, former board member of the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, and arguably one of the key leaders that's helped evolve this space now for well over a decade as we dig into understanding what the personal data and identity marketplace is and where it's going. So Julian, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for asking me to contribute today. So it's great.
Absolutely. So let me start with one question for you, and then we can evolve into a handful of others. And the first question I want to ask you is, let's talk about these personal data, personal information management solutions, or these applications that are emerging in the marketplace, like yours, like DigiMe. And what are your thoughts around consumer adoption, and what is it going to take to generate awareness, encourage registration, onboarding, and then ultimate utilization of these tools?
Okay, so the most important thing we've learned over many years in doing this thing is that individuals are not natively interested in their data. So they're not going to adopt PIMS or what we might call data facilitators just because, right? Privacy, security, consent is an issue, but people talk about the privacy paradox. Why do people want all this but also seem to do other things? And it really comes down to the fact that people aren't natively interested in data. They're not interested in managing things, which is why I disagree with the word PIM, by the way, because it involves management and people aren't interested in that. What they're interested in is the end result. What happens with their data, what gives them value. So the value is the key to the whole of this sphere with personal data is what value proposition are you giving to an individual, and then what does that mean? Now that's today. In 3 to 5 years' time, choose a number, could be 2, could be 3, could be 4, 5. I think people will understand that having the data themselves creates many, many opportunities for value, and therefore people will be interested in having their data. But that's not today, right?
Okay. And so what is today then?
Well, today is all about what I want to achieve, right? Now, I might want to achieve better health. I might have a health problem. I might want to save time in retail or be given opportunities for what interests me. And it could be retail, it could be finance, it could be travel or whatever else. But it's that end goal. Now, I don't know when I'm reaching for that end goal that my data is going to be useful for that end goal. So it's up to businesses, researchers, governments even, who have a place to play in this, to recognize that I want something. And to get to where I want to be, they need my data to personalize this for me, because we are about hyper-personalization. And that includes, let's just take 2 areas, health and consumer personalization. So in health, I don't want generic advice. If I've got diabetes, I want a diabetes app that's about me, understands my medications, my factors for my wearables and stuff like that, and gives me recommendations for me. Now, if you can give me a recommendation that keeps me healthy, that's one hell of a value proposition, right? Now, to do that, you might need my data. You might need my medications and my wearables. So you have to ask me for that. Now, how on earth do you do that today? You can't easily. This is where, and I don't call them PIMS, I use the phrase that the EU has used in their forthcoming Data Governance Act, which is a data facilitator. Yes, I need something to help me share my data with that diabetes app. Or if I've got a medical issue and I'm trying to collect all my medical data together for a GP or a video consultation, help me share my data so I get the best medical result. Or if I am at a retail site and they can personalize for my particular things. So you might be in a health food store and I might be a heavy exerciser, so therefore I need a different protein shake to somebody who is more sedentary or whatever it may be, right? And we should be careful not to have too many specific examples because that's where the innovation is coming from. But whatever that value proposition is, a business is saying, hey, Julian, if you want this, then I need your data. Now, at that point, how on earth do they get the data? That's where PIMS, data facilitators, whatever you want to call them, come in, because we make it easy then for an individual to access their data and then share it onwards. But the pull, what gets me into this new world of human centricity, where the data comes to me and then me outwards, is that value proposition. And I may not really understand in depth that first time what I'm doing. I may not realize that I'm pulling the data to me and then me consenting to share it because I'm really interested in that diabetes app, right? Or whatever else it may be. But I'm going through that process. Now, as I go through that process, if it's designed right, and companies like DigiMe, we'd like to think we've designed it right, is I will be presented with a very clear consent request, right? Consent certificate in our terms. And the EU got it right with GDPR. They said it must be explicit and informed consent. So I'll see something that says, Julian, I need your medications and your wearables data to give you the right advice to manage your diabetes to keep you healthy. And I go, okay, that makes sense. So I say yes. And then I'm asked to authenticate my feed from my hospital or whatever the data facilitators created and my wearable, and I say yes. And then that data flows to the business and I get the value exchange. I'm getting that advice or whatever it is. Now, that first time, I've seen the explicit informed consent. I've felt comfortable because it's been presented in a nice way. I've understood that it's only for that purpose, but my data's flowed. I don't necessarily fully understand, even though it will have told me that it's come to me, but I've got what I want. Now, the second time I do that flow, I might be starting to think, hold on a moment, this is coming to me and I've got my library and I can start to see it and I can manage my consent easily. And the third time, and then the press is now talking about this because it's happening more and more. And I start to realize that, oh, I am the center for collecting all my data and I get all of these new value propositions. That's the way it is undoubtedly working, because we've been in the business for quite a while and you can see that that's the only way. So you have to do a couple of things. You have to make it really easy for businesses to access that, to onboard people, minimal friction in terms of the consent and the authentication. You have to have the 100% privacy, security of the data being held by the individual and being passed on, but you've got to make that flow really easy. And then you've got to add all the other bells that will be needed as people really understand it, like managing their consent centrally with a dashboard, being able to see their data happen. But that's a second order thing to the first, which is the consent and the authentication and the value proposition. Now, once you've done that, you start to really, businesses of all shapes and sizes, from the smallest to the biggest, will see that going to the individual solves a lot of their problems. First of all, it's easy to get the data. It's really hard otherwise today, right? But it's easy to get the data. Secondly, the data is accurate. If you go to data brokers and stuff today, data can be anything up to 60% wrong. So they've got really high quality data. What we do in DigiMe is we also normalize the data, which puts it into a single format to make it even easier to use. And because the data is rich, it's high quality, it's from source and validated as such, actually you need simpler algorithms to extract the features to do what you want to do. So it's easier for businesses again, rather than complex. Now, because of all of the above, it's actually quicker and cheaper, cost effective for businesses to do it this way from the individual. Oh, and they've got all the legislative stuff right, the consent, the privacy and everything else. So you make it easy for the businesses to give high value exchanges to the individual. Now that gets it used. As it gets more and more used, people start to realize that those advantages I just listed, the 6 advantages, right, are suddenly actually opening up more and more and more and more value exchanges then people start to understand that actually having your data is key, and they'll really only work with services that give them the data back. And that's now where you've got an ecosystem of human centricity. Now, it's interesting that that's what you have to do, and that is what is happening now. COVID itself has actually been an interesting kickstart for that, because you're seeing things like health passes, right? You know, what's my PCR test, my rapid antigen test, my vaccines, and we're very nervous about that being centralized. But if I hold it and then I can decide to share it when I want to do so, that's different, right? It's a classic example of when it comes to me and then I can consent for it, it tends to work. Whereas if you try to sort of say it'll be held centrally and other people can do it, people are very nervous. So there are these examples about value exchange is critical. And that can be a business, it can be researchers, it can be even governments. And we are working with some governments. If you actually think about it, governments know a lot about you, but because we're worried about privacy, they're split into silos. No single government department knows all about you. That actually can make it really difficult to work with government, because I might need my tax and benefits information to use in another branch of government that can't get that directly. But if it can get it via me, we can simplify processes and procedures and all sorts of things. So I think the key to adoption is those value exchanges that the businesses, researchers, and governments create, and then making it really easy. So your PIMS, your data facilitators, whatever you want to call them, have to make that really easy. It's almost to the level at which an individual doesn't necessarily have to understand what's happening, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what I hear, what essentially I hear you saying then is, at some point, again, focusing on this, and what did you call it? The facilitator, if you will, data facilitator. Yeah. So for me, the data facilitator is like a layer. You know, it's that intermediary layer. I mean, I haven't looked at the API structures and all that, but that's what's popping in my head when I hear that. But the idea is there's a centralized database of me, whatever you want to call it, personal data store, PIMS, data facilitator, whatever, that my data gets centralized. And then I'm putting utilities on top of it. And those utilities are the value exchange mechanisms. And I could see down the road, as I think about this, I mean, some of those utilities are purely for protection purposes, such as password managers, things like that. Other utilities can be for first-party business exchanges and relationships, like the healthcare provider that you talked about. So the one-to-one relationships. Other facilities might be a one-to-many relationship for like advertising. You know, I promote a certain part of my feed into that programmatic ad network that would allow then many to engage and interact with me. So I see there being a variety of flavors of this value utility that you're discussing down the road.
Right, you can have almost anything. So try and think of, let me give you an analogy. Right? If we look at electricity and we had the electricity grid bringing electricity to homes, there was 0 point in bringing the electricity to homes if you had no appliances using electricity.
Right.
So there's 0 point you stocking up on all your data if you've got nothing to use it for.
Right. Yeah, all dressed up and nowhere to go.
Right. Exactly. Now, it's not, you can find a use. I mean, I have to tell you that having used DigiMe for years, it's nice to be able to see all my bank data, all my health data and everything else and be able to search and find something quickly. But that's a very small use case. And there's 10 to 20% of people back up their data properly off their computers and stuff. And I suppose that 10 to 20% might be natively interested in their data, but the vast majority are not. So bringing electricity to the home requires appliances. So what I want you to think about is that national grid that brings the electricity, that's what a data facilitator is. That's what DigiMe is. So if you think of all of the different supply side on electricity, whether that's nuclear, coal-powered, oil-powered, wind, solar, tidal, they're the different power stations, right? Or in our case, it might be social, medical, finance, whatever, right? The different things. Now, those different power stations, first thing that happens is they get their supply rectified so it's 50 hertz, 240 volts, or 110 in the US, right? And so that's what we call normalization. You have to try and make it easy for the end consumers to consume. So you have to bring all those horrible data formats into one. So we do that. So DigiMe brings all of that data to the home, to the individual. Now, the individual then, for any one task, and look around our houses today, we've got innumerable appliances running off electricity, just as we'll have innumerable value exchanges running off our data, all right? And it isn't just advertising. That's just like one tiny little piece of the whole circle of things we can do, all right? So health, as I said, and all the other things. Now, within any one appliance thing, take a washing machine, right? Now, forget the brands, but in any country, you can buy at least 10 different brands of washing machine to wash your clothes. What do? They just wash your clothes. But some of them have more technical features and different temperatures. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are cheap. Some of them are expensive. Some of them are nice colors. Some of them are smaller, fit in different things. There is a huge variety of value exchanges within that one job of doing washing your clothes. All right.
Yep.
So there'll be a huge variety of different business propositions for tailoring your shopping experience. And some will go this way, some will go that way, some will have a unique idea and do something different. All great, but they're all running off electricity, or in this case, data. Now, what a data facilitator or PIMS job is to do is bring your data to the home, to you, and then do a little bit more, because the on-off switch to the appliance or the app or service that you're using in this case is your consent certificate, right? So you have to have the consent as part of it. So you get to turn the switch on and off. And if you turn it on, you can subsequently turn it off. And then there's a standard API for all of these appliance users, which is like the standard socket, all right? And so a data facilitator is the national grid bringing the data to the individual, is the on-off switch and the socket, right? But all of the use cases are all the vast plethora of appliances. I mean, I'm looking around here. I've got lights, I've got washing machines, I've got computers, I've got phones, I've got games machines, I've got all sorts of stuff, right? And that's the value propositions. And why I plumb electricity into my home is because I've got value propositions that use the electricity, right?
No, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. So let me take a step back and a different look at this. So when we look at this concept of the personal data and identity market or marketplace, can you talk a little bit about where it is today, where it's going, and how do we assess it? What mechanisms or methods would be most effective for assessing it and talking about it?
So it's a very nascent market, early. Right now, we were too early. We were ready in the marketplace 3 years ago. So I'm seeing and fighting the battle of the early adoption and all of those types of things. So there's a big use of personal data, which is grabbed from behind you, all of the terrible things that happen with your personal data. And it's largely used for advertising and a few other things, right? But largely that. That is such a small part of the whole, but that's where huge value has been created. But imagine now we take the advertising segment and now we increase it to all the other things. There is a huge untapped use cases for our personal data. And so what's happening right now is people in this huge other area are starting to say, well, if I could do this, oh, if I could do that. And some people are building communities. So you can build a community of people who are prepared to share their health data for drug research. Or you might be, as I said, a specific health app for you, the individual, or a retail or a bank app or travel or whatever it may be. So people, the marketplace is where there are early adopters saying, oh, look, I can get really high quality data really simply, quickly, and do some amazing things with it if I go via the individual. And you're seeing little flashes of light over that whole circle. I think in the next year to 2 years, those flashes of lights will be strong beacons, which will attract others. And within 5 years, it will be commonplace that you get your data only from the individual. But right now, it's nascent, it's beginning. All right. Now, we happen to be one of the leaders in this area. And, unfortunately, confidentiality in a lot of places stops me telling you some of the super examples that are happening. But there are some really great examples happening from big businesses to small businesses across the world, from governments as well. And there's all sorts of things happening, but they're little flashes of light is where we are.
No, that makes total sense. And So tell me about this distinction between these two terms, personal data and identity. Because as I talk to people, depending on who I'm talking to, that you get very different perspectives.
Yeah, I'd sometimes use a military analogy for this, but that probably doesn't go down for the most people. But it sometimes helps people understand. Identity historically has been generally about the government generated data about you. In other words, what starts from your birth certificate, you're Julian Ranger, you're born on this time and date, and you're born here, and now you live at this place. And then it goes a little bit further to your passport and all the details of a passport number, and then your driving license and your address and how long you've lived there. But it's a very small set of data, but is used to say, you are Julian Ranger, you really are, you're able to drink, you're over 18, you're able to get a passport, you can open a bank account, you really are that unique individual. It's a small set of data, but really high value, really personal. And if you lose it, by the way, or somebody impersonates you, there can be really serious consequences. Personal data is absolutely everything else, right? It's really your activity is the simplest way to call it. It's every social interaction. It's every bank transaction. It's every purchase. It's every music listening. It's vast quantities of data that says much, much more about who you are as a functioning individual, but not your Julian Ranger. I'm quite a complex person. To some people, I'm a rugby fanatic and you know, drink probably too much of rugby and that type of social people. To other persons, I'm a businessman with various levels of success. To something else, I'm down the pub, and we're very different people. My activity shows that side of me, whereas my identity is the same in all of those. I'm Julian Ranger, who lives in, a village in the UK, etc. Now, what's happened is that identity has really only been used in very formal circumstances, KYC for banking and stuff like that. Now, when you look at the internet today, I don't often really have to prove who I am. So even though in Amazon, I've been an Amazon Prime member, I don't know, since 2000 and something very early, right? They don't actually know that I'm Julian Ranger. They don't actually know that I live at Condell Lodge. What they do know is I've got a credit card, right?
Right.
And so, now, I happen to get nearly all my stuff sent to my home address, and so they can seem, well, he probably does live there because he's done stuff, but I do send stuff to my daughter at university and my boys and other stuff. But the preponderance of stuff is there, but the only identity that they have is my credit card. And so they assume that the KYC that's been done by the credit card company says I'm Julian Ranger. Facebook doesn't know who I am from Adam, nor does Twitter. Now, of course,
and in the context of Amazon, they don't really even care who you are as long as they're getting paid. They don't need to know. They don't care.
Correct. So identity hasn't been used that much, but we talk a lot about identity as your username and password. But really, that's just an authentication system. It's not really my identity. I don't consider it my identity. Now, as we move forwards, of course, in different parts of the world and different things, my activity can prove my identity, right? So if I've had 20 years of bank transactions at the same address, that pretty much tells you that that is my address, right? Yep. So activity can form identity, and identity can be helpful in lots of different circumstances. But the two are separate. Now, unfortunately, they often get merged together. And then you have this thing about the third term, which is verified credentials. Now, a verified credential is when you verify something, a third party says, no, that's really true. So rather than me just telling you I'm Julian Ranger, a third party like the UK government says, no, he's really Julian Ranger, and we're going to give an encrypted thing that says it's him. But you then move on to my training, my university. I got a degree in aeronautical engineering at Imperial. Now, at the moment, it's very hard to know that I did that. But Imperial could sign a certificate digitally that says that I did, or somebody could say they verified it with Imperial, and that's a verified credential. Or the fact that I work at DigiMe, somebody could sign and verify that. And that's sort of bound up in identity more these days, because that verified credential identity has always been a verified thing in general.
Yeah. And I've just come across David Hughes. I don't know if you heard, or Hughesby, David Hughesby. has just written a really interesting article called Authenticated Data. And so, what the argument there is, the point that you were talking about identity. I'm verifying your identity, and that's the whole verified credential model. And that often gets mixed up with that idea of identity. And what David's suggesting is that the idea of authenticated data may be a better term, because at that point you have similar concept, but what you're doing is you're authenticating pieces of data about me. You're authenticating my behavior. Yeah.
So if you look at as DigiMe as a data facilitator, when we connect to your bank account and give you your bank data, we give it to you, you hold it, we don't see, hold, or touch it. It goes to your own store encrypted with your things, but you can't modify it. So when you then share it on, somebody knows, the person you're sharing it with knows that it came from Barclays, Lloyds, or Bank of America, or whatever. It is authenticated through the process that DigiMe gave.
Right, and you're essentially through that process, much like probably a bad analogy, but chain of evidence, if you will, from like when you watch the cop shows, right? Are you maintaining chain of evidence? That's the verified credential.
Correct, but in this case, what we're not doing is saying that we verified that it was Julian Ranger. We're saying Barclays Bank, you've logged on to Barclays Bank and assumed therefore that you've got Julian Ranger's bank account details. What we're saying is that you've got Julian Ranger's bank account details, and so therefore the business getting it assumes that was valid, and we can say those are the bank details we got from Barclays. So if you trust Barclays, you absolutely know that, and by the way, other banks are available, as they always say on the BBC, but you absolutely know that is Julian Ranger's Barclays bank account data. Now, you have to verify that's Julian.
Now, and that's the way today's model works and tomorrow's, but in the near future, when we do actually get the verified credential identity pieces in play, there could actually be that verification methodology for...
Well, that is coming too. So no, we're adding verified identity and verified credentials, and because it's activity, it's you've got a store, right?
Yeah.
Now, people call it a wallet. I hate that phrase. I know why they call it a wallet, because you hold your bank cards and your driving license in a wallet. But a wallet sounds like you're selling data, and you're not. You're exchanging it for value, which is different. So we call it a library, but it doesn't matter. Call it a wallet, a vault, whatever you want to call it. But so it doesn't matter what's in there, whether it's a verified credential, identity, activity, whatever it is, and then you can share it. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about identity is where we should go. Why, when I can log on to the UK passport office, never having had a passport, I can say who I am, they can do it all digitally, I can send a photograph and everything else, and I can get a passport, never having seen a human being, just with an ability on the line, and I get a physical passport that now proves my identity to everybody. So why can't the passport office, with that log on that I've got, give me my digital passport straight into my wallet, vault, library, whatever you want to do? Of course they can, and that will happen. Now, it isn't going to happen this year. Possibly the first ones might happen next year, but very soon we will hold directly from the source our driving license, our birth certificate, our passports and things. And so those people who are in the third-party verification process will start to feel the pain, right? Because if the government has given it me and verified it straight into my wallet, which they should do, I don't need a third party to validate it. Now, when I present it, how do you know it's me? Well, now you have people whose job it is to biometrically check that the details stored in the passport is me, and I'm live, and I'm, that's a different game. So the verification at the point of presentation is a different thing, right? But the verified credential itself can come directly from the source. And again, that will happen over time, but it's going to be quite a long time before that happens.
But it will be too. I remember the day when we all thought, how would I ever be able to check into an airplane with a QR code on my phone? And then now it's commonplace and no one even thinks twice anymore. It's basically the same thing.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
So this is this movement that, as I said.
Well, and the other thing too, I had a wonderful call yesterday with a woman from the Randa Corporation, which I'll be presenting that interview later. But the concept there too is in that model, that also actually allows for revoking the certification too. So let's say the government chooses that my passport is no longer valid. Well, through that channel, they can basically or that certificate.
Correct. You're connected to the government, so they can revoke it at any time because of that connection. Now, if you break that connection, which is always your right to do, then when you pass it on, you can say, well, this is it, but it was valid as of 3 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and another example of that too would be future business models as well, is what happens if there is the need to maintain, much like every 5 years you need your passport renewed, right? That is both for just continuing to verify that I'm still who I am, possibly getting my picture updated, but it's also a revenue stream as well, right? Because to be able to maintain that infrastructure.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, so people then, it's an interesting question because you move on to how on earth does this data facilitator make any money, right? So we're very strong, not everybody is, but we're very strong on the fact that we don't see, touch, or hold data.
Well, no, but I'm also talking not necessarily a revenue stream for you. What I was referring to is a revenue stream for the government. Right. So the government does have to maintain infrastructure for certifying you who you are, maintaining who you are, keeping that updated.
But the government's going to do that anyway. Let's not be.
I'm talking more of like schools or hospitals or institutions.
No, that's part of the daily grind. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that as a revenue stream. Right. Look, governments take the US Meaningful Use 3 legislation, patient-directed access. I go to a hospital, I pay enough for my treatment. I get my data back for free, thank you very much. And you ain't charging me for that. And in fact, governments have said it's for free. And GDPR says, I get my data for free. Now, if you want to charge me for a service, that's fine, I can do it. But my data's mine and it's free. So it ain't going to change.
Right, but think about it in the context of today of me getting a updated transcript for the fact that I went to that college.
Now,
right.
Well, look,
how much do I have to pay that college like $50 to print out that piece of paper every year?
Yeah,
or time ask for it.
Michael, it costs them more to do than they get for the $50. So you'll find that the college will love electronic verification because it reduces their costs dramatically today. So they lose the $50 that they're charging you. But it's a bit like today with GPs. GPs, if I want my patient record, they can charge me up to 50 quid, right?
Right.
To give me it on paper. It costs them 100 quid plus. So they lose money.
So what you're saying is they'll happily let that top line revenue go because they're going to save bottom line costs.
Oh, correct. And in fact, governments are mandating that it's for free. Look, if I go to a hospital and I've paid X £1,000, whether it's through insurance or the government or my own money for the benefit of being cured, they ain't going to charge me another 20 quid to have my data. Thank you very much. Right? Go pound sand on that one. Right. So no, the data flows for free. All right, back to the individual. And that is happening in every government in the world, including China, by the way, right? In places like that. So no, the data comes for free. So, and then I, as an individual, I have unlimited usage rights to my data. I can print my medical data off, put it on the window of my car and drive around and show the world. If anyone else does that, they go to prison or they get fined for breaching my privacy, right? So now what I then choose the value exchange to share my data is up to me, right? Now, so what we as data facilitators must not ever do, and the EU's encapsulating that, we can't charge for the data. It's not mine. It's DigiMe, it's not mine, it's the individuals. So I act just like a courier company, or just like the national grid charges not for the cost of the electricity, because that's the electricity companies that do that. They just charge a carriage fee for the data.
Yeah. You're getting an Infomediary service fee, your FedEx, your UPS, and you're getting
correct.
Paid for.
That's all we're doing.
Now, other questions. So we've talked about the marketplace, and there is a marketplace today. One of the things I've heard you essentially, I'm intuiting based on what you said, is one of the big distinctions is the individual data subject in the next generation of this marketplace is going to have a much more active role. And they're going to have an active role with a new participant, maybe this Infomediary or data facilitator player that will help them have that active role in this marketplace.
Because they can't connect it up themselves.
Right, exactly. And they're not CIOs and they don't know how to do it and all that. So this then raises the next question. If that's the marketplace, one, how do we go about estimating its size?
It's very, very difficult, hugely difficult. Now, people have tried to do it. So the simplest way to look at it is for 20 years, the personal data marketplace has been involved primarily, not exclusively, but primarily for advertising.
Yeah.
Right. And there are $1 trillion worth of businesses built on just that little sector. So by sheer analogy, if you're going to open up all the other sectors, right, it's in the trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
Right. So who cares? Frankly, I don't care.
Yeah, well, what's the adage? Horseshoes and hand grenades. The closest wins. It's all good.
I don't care. It is undeniably massive.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And it opens it up. So whether it's 1 trillion, 1.5 trillion, or 5 trillion, I really don't care. It's hugely massive. DigiMe is an example. We set our postal fees, as we call them, because we're a courier company, or transfer fees, at less than 1% of the economic value as we see it, less than 1%. Now, if the business value is worth trillions, and if we were to get all of it, which we won't, but nonetheless, you can see that the addressable market for a company like us is so large that it is.
Yeah, sure. So let me ask you this question then. So, in just kind of wrapping up in the last few minutes we have, what is it that people need to know about what's happening right now? And then based on that knowledge, what is it that they need to do?
Okay. So I'm going to go back to how I opened this, right? Which is the 6 problems that companies see at the moment. It's hard to get personal data. It's a highly variable quality, comes in multiple incompatible formats. Because of 1 to 3, you have to do really complex and difficult data analytics to extract any meaningful information. Because of 1 to 4, it's expensive in money, time, and effort. And then all of the privacy legislation and trust and everything else just exacerbates all of the above. That's horrendous. So most people look at it and go, I won't do it. So only the biggest companies do it or whatever else. And it's just not working. People are trying, but it doesn't work. In this new world where you can go to the individual, it's easy to get data. It's a very high quality. It's all normalized. It's easy to extract the value points. It's quick and cheap to do it. So now what do you need to know as a company? If you don't start thinking, there's only one thing you have to think about: what value proposition are you going to offer, right? So if you can do something with data, that's the value proposition. Think about the value propositions you could do if you could get hold of the data, because getting hold of the data is easy now, and get on the train. Because if you don't start now, and you can start very small, very easily, not a lot of money, but if you don't start now, those companies that do will outrace you, because they'll be going through the evolutionary hoops to do it. Because that marketplace is here today. It's nascent, but you've been waiting for that time to get hold of that data and do something with it, right? And people will share the data. So you've been intimately involved with the MEF's privacy and trust reports for the last, we've been doing it as MEF for 5-6 years. But it says every year, people are more and more concerned, but over 70% every year will share their data if they know what it's for, who it is getting it, and exactly the limitations of the purpose. So people will share it, but you have to ask them directly. And if you ask them directly, you will get this gold mine of data, but you better have a value proposition. And to understand what you can do, you need to start playing with it. So what we're seeing is the companies that are getting involved now, and they're starting with simple propositions, simple amounts, and then slowly accelerating from there because it's really easy. That's the key thing. Now, you can sit on the sidelines. Some do. Some are leaders. Some are followers. Some are fast followers. All the companies have different views. But the point is, there is no barrier now for entry to get personal data. So as a typical person, me as an individual, I have orders of magnitude more data about myself now than Facebook does, and see what Facebook does with it. And I have orders of magnitude more data than I can share with anybody. A one-man person in his bedroom can ask me for data. If it's a value proposition I want to share it, they can have just any extraordinary amounts of information about me now. Right?
Well, Julian, this was absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much for the discussion. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to our next time we get to chat.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.